Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. The case that I'm going to be looking into today is, well, it's a case that was actually dubbed the Ken and Barbie killers. Not entirely sure why. Apparently the US dubbed them. It's because they're good looking. I personally don't see it, but there you go. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, I guess. But basically, it's like people thought that these pair were really attractive and like were really shocked when they had committed crimes and things. But as we all know, people are people, whether they're beautiful or not. They can still be murderous killers. So yeah, I don't know why people get shocked. Well, maybe they don't as much anymore, but there you go. Anyway, we're gonna talk about Bernardo and Karla Homolka. This case was suggested by Amelia, so thank you for that. I appreciate any suggestions you guys have. And of course, if you do have any more, please do let me know. Paul Kenneth Bernardo was born on the 27th of August in 1964 to his mother Marilyn and his father Kenneth. Well, he actually wasn't, but we'll get more into that. In Canada, and he was born into quite a wealthy but very dysfunctional family. Kenneth was said to be quite an abusive husband, and after Marilyn actually gave birth to a son and a daughter to him, she then apparently went to seek the affections of a former boyfriend. She ended up getting pregnant from him, and that was where Paul came along. Kenneth apparently tolerated his wife's affair. He brought Paul up like he was his own, essentially. They didn't tell him that, you know, he wasn't his biological dad. And his name was actually put on the birth certificate as well as the father. So he grew up essentially believing that Kenneth was his father. And boy, was he a piece of work as well. Like, he was not a nice person. He got done for molestation. And again, he was abusive. And then, which I don't quite understand, Paul, when he had ended up having an argument with his mum, okay? When he was 16 years old. And, you know, she told him that basically Kenneth was not his dad, and he went mad. He was like fuming about that. And I get it, okay? You've been like lied to about who your own father was. I understand that, but Kenneth was a horrible person. Why would you even want him as your dad? I would be glad, but he wasn't. And this is when he started to like verbally abuse his mother, I believe. But I kind of skipped ahead there. I got a bit carried away. Before that, despite all the family stuff that was going on, it was said that Paul was very happy. People described him as a very young boy. People described him as a young boy who smiled a lot. He was very well mannered. He did well at school. He was like this perfect child. And then, obviously, teenage years hit. And then they had the argument and it all blew up. By the time he was attending the University of Toronto in Scarborough, he had begun manifesting these dark, sexual, twisted thoughts. He had fantasies about humiliating public in women? No, that is not right. Women in public, I meant to say. And he would like fantasize about beating these women up and just a whole bunch of awful things. Then we come around to October of 1987 and he meets Karla Homolka, and they basically fell for each other straight away. Karla Leanne Homolka was born on the 4th of May in 1970 to her father, Karel, I apologise if I said that wrong, and her mother was called Dorothy. She was born in Port Credit in Ontario, and the family had 3 children in total, all daughters. They had Karla, Laurie, and Tammy Lynn. Her father was a Czechoslovakian immigrant and he worked as a travelling salesman. He would often get drunk and things, and they would argue, you know, her parents would argue and they fought together, and obviously all the sisters would just kind of band together and just, I don't know, support each other. It was said that she was, you know, she was a lovely girl. She would enjoy doing hobbies like drawing. She had a passion for animals that she apparently loved. Although there's some things that I read that makes me believe that she didn't, because at one point she ended up throwing her friend's hamster out of a window and killed it. So that doesn't burst a love of animals to me. There you go. But she was said to be a bright student and was liked by most of her teachers, most of her pupils, everyone around her. Well, apart from some of her peers, because she was quite bossy with them apparently, and obviously I'm assuming here because I wouldn't like that, but Maybe they didn't like that. Who knows? By the age of 12, she was reading books like Nancy Drew, The Hardy Boys, just kind of mysteries, and she got really, really involved in crime and true crime and everything that revolved around that. I mean, hey, we're here now. We're obviously really interested in things like that, but I mean, there's being interested in it, and then there's doing what she would go on to do. Yeah, we'll talk about that more. Okay. The older she got, the more interested she became in doing things like scaring a friend. She started looking into the occult and things like that, dark things, and she would often call on spirits with her friends. And I mean, all of that is just like messing around and things like that. You know, a lot of people do that, but just could have been an inkling, I guess. A little one. Or it could not have been, because she could have turned out perfectly normal, but she didn't, so there you go. While she was in high school, she was said to be, like, she didn't really care what people thought about her. She would do her own thing. She would dress however she wanted to. She didn't, she didn't follow the herd like a sheep. She didn't put on the same clothes that everyone else did, or that was in fashion at the time. She didn't give a damn about that. She didn't care what others thought about her. She was very bold, and she was very quick to sort of get in with the opposite sex and mingle with the guys, things like that. She often as well went down the road of dark fantasies where she would fantasize about a lot of things surrounding death. I have no idea. And apparently she once tried to cut herself with a knife. So I mean, you can see right off the bat that both of these two people are sort of going towards dark paths. Then those two people's dark paths met each other. That is a recipe for disaster, and it was. When she was 17 years old is when she met Paul. It was at this convention or something like that. And it was said that as soon as Paul walked into the room, she was sat on the table with some friends, right? In this restaurant or something. And he walks into the room and they lock eyes, and that is that. There is instant fireworks. He comes over, he sits down, they talk for a while. She pretty much ignores the friends, I believe, just talks to him. And I mean, isn't that weird? Because I've never had an experience like that. Have you ever like set eyes on someone and been like, wow, and then they're the same and they come over and they talk to you? I mean, I'm just sad, I guess. I never have. I find it weird. Also, they decided that the first day that they were gonna have sexual relations together, so they go up to the room and that is what they do. And this is apparently when they discovered that they had shared sort of thoughts and fantasies and things like that. The dark ones, obviously. And at the time, Paul was actually 6 years older than her. She was 17 and he was like 23, I believe. So there was quite a big age gap, but nobody really cared about that. It just kind of, it made Karla want him more, I guess, because he was an older man and he was interested in her and she was in her teens, and it was like, whew, amazing. He was handsome, he was charming, well educated, he had a good, well, not a good family background, but his family were quite wealthy, and it was just the kind of man that she wanted and that she had been sort of dreaming about. And I mean, don't we all in that sense? But I just prefer to not have the dark tendency bit. It's just my personal opinion, The Homolka family basically welcomed him in with open arms. Dorothy would refer to him as her weekend son. He would end up moving in with them, and basically that was like to save money so that they could get their own place. But yeah, they absolutely adored him. They didn't see anything wrong with him and just thought he was amazing, and they were really happy that he was with their daughter. But again, Paul had a secret. He had urges that he felt like he needed to fulfill, and he did fulfill them. He was caught a number of times peeping, as basically a peeping Tom in the neighborhood. But then it just escalated. Like, that's where it began, and it just got worse and worse. Obviously, I've already told you he had the fantasies about women, the dark fantasies, public humiliation. That's not going to go well anywhere unless you keep those fantasies in your head and never act on them. He did not do that. He acted on them. But yeah. So on the 4th of May in 1987 is when he committed his first sexual assault. And I believe that was before he met Karla. Yeah, I think it was actually. It was before he met her. So by the time that they were getting together and began dating, he'd already committed multiple sexual assaults. So he was out raping women, and then he's like seemingly this charming, lovely guy with Karla and things like that. By September of 1995, Paul Bernardo had become known as the Scarborough rapist. Not that anybody knew, of course, because they didn't. The people who he attacked, I believe, were often done from like behind. They didn't really get a good look at him. Just awful, awful, awful things. And they didn't know who was doing this. So they, like the media do, they gave him a name, and that is how they were referred to him. Of course, the police were looking into it, and eventually they did get a woman who could give a description of this man, right? So she gives this description, this sketch is made from him, and, well, pretty much remarkably, amazingly looks exactly like Paul Bernardo. And actually, some of his friends see this sketch of the Scarborough rapist and think, that kind of looks like Paul. So they actually call the police and tell them sort of that this sketch resembles their friend Paul. And I believe a few other friends also called in to make that remark too. And so they did actually interview Paul. They brought him in, they're chatting away to him, they asked for his DNA. He is completely fine, like he is not worried at all. He's just calm. They asked for his DNA. Yep, of course you can have my DNA. Totally fine. So they take his DNA. But the thing with that is, which is absolutely devastatingly horrific and sad, because DNA testing was, I believe it was like fairly new then. There was a massive backlog. They had interviewed men, hundreds of men. They got all the DNA. There was a queue. And Paul Bernardo was now at the back of this queue. And this queue would take a very long time to get to him. So it's so frustrating looking back at it. Not that anybody knew it at the time, but if they would have just tested his DNA because he looked like the sketch, they would have had a match straight away. But they didn't. They left it on the shelf, waiting and waiting and waiting. So that's just a bit frustrating. But, there you go. There's nothing you can do about that. It's just hindsight. I mean, you would have thought that because he looked like him, they just would have done it, but they didn't. I guess they didn't want to skip queues, and that was that. But again, it was in its infancy, I believe. So, yeah. Karla was said to basically, I've read a transcript, which we'll talk a little bit about later, but she refers to him in that as king. So, as you can imagine, she basically what seemed like she worshipped the floor that he walked on. She would do anything for him. Now, Karla had sexual relations with another man before Paul. So she basically was not a virgin, and Paul Bernardo wanted some virgins. Because she was not one, he then locked eyes onto her younger sister, Tammy Lynn. And it really bugged him, I believe, that, his girlfriend was not a virgin anymore because he wanted to take that from her. As I've said, I can't talk. As I've said, he had these horrible fantasies about women and just really dark thoughts. So he began taking a liking to the sister, Tammy, who was still a virgin. He would peek through windows and watch her undress. He apparently broke her blinds at one point so that they opened a little bit so that when she thought she was in the privacy of her own room, he could see her still. He'd look through windows at her and stuff and just perv on her. And he actually told Karla that he wanted to take her sister's flower away from her. And Karla apparently, reluctantly, so it was said, agreed to this. I mean, just reluctantly or not, just no. Just no. That's your answer? No. Hell no. Get out of my house. Go away. Weirdo. But, yeah, okay. And also, Tammy was 15, so it was also illegal. So she set the plan into motion, basically. She was working at the time at a vet's, so she gets a sedative that they used for surgery, the anesthetics in surgery for animals, and she brings that home. She took sleeping pills from somewhere, so I don't know whether that was from the vet's as well or not, but I know that she got this drug called halothane from the vet's, which is I think it's like a dispersible anesthetic. That's how she used it anyway. And she takes that home. And then on the day of the 23rd of December, so bearing in mind 2 days till Christmas, a beautiful family occasion where people really enjoy, Paul says to Karla, yep, tonight's the night. We're going to do this thing. And Karla is like, Okay, so what she did is she put sleeping pills in either her food or her drink. I've read both, don't know which is which. I've read that she made a spaghetti and crunched it up into that, or that she put it in her drinks. I mean, it doesn't really matter which one, I guess. And like I've said, it was getting up to Christmas. The family were having like this Christmas celebrations, pre-Christmas celebrations. They were all having a drink, all having a laugh, having a good time. And Tammy, like I've said, she was only 15 at the time. She was not sort of accustomed to alcohol. At least they thought, anyway. So she's having a drink as well. And nobody thinks that it's too suspicious when she starts seeing double, when the room starts spinning, because they just think that, you know, she just can't handle the booze. She's had too much to drink, and that's all it is. But it wasn't. Most of the family in the night, they got up to bed. But Tammy wanted to stay downstairs with Paula and... No, not Paula. Paul and Karla. Paula. Okay. And watch this movie or something like that. Finish off watching this movie. So they sat there, they're watching this movie, and then Tammy falls unconscious from the drugs and the booze. Karla had a rag soaked in halothane, which she held to her sister's face. It actually caused a chemical burn. And bearing in mind, when surgeries occur with animals or people, they have machines to, and anesthesiologists to actually make sure that the right dose is getting given to them, you know, and things like that. But she's just soaked this rag and she's shoving it on her face. So who knows, too much, too little, who knows how much she was giving her at that point, because everything should have been, obviously, I can't think of the word, but you know what I mean. And it wasn't. But, you know, they didn't care, because at that point, Paul was sexually assaulting Tammy, raping her, whilst Karla was stood holding the rag over her. He then told Karla to perform some sexual acts on her sister, which she did. I don't know, but she did. I mean, it's just gross. Gross, but yeah. And poor Tammy was just knocked out for all of it, drugged up, and it's just absolutely horrific what they did to her. It's just completely breaks my heart. I forgot to mention as well, one thing was that they were taping the entire thing because, you know, memories, that's, I don't know. Honestly, this case is just vile, but yeah, it was all taped. Then things took a turn when Tammy began vomiting. She began choking on that vomit, and they panicked. They got her dressed, pretended like nothing had happened. They say that they do CPR on her, blah blah blah, and they ring for an ambulance. When the paramedics get there, they eventually pronounce Tammy as deceased, sadly. Now, they do an autopsy on Tammy's body, and you're thinking, fantastic. They're gonna find out that she was drugged. They're gonna catch them. No, they're not. Apparently, the autopsy was done pretty poorly, and they didn't find the drug in her system. Who knows? Now, one thing they did notice was the burn on her face, but they had a reason for that too, because they basically said that they pulled her off the bed to try and do CPR, and it was just a carpet burn. And they believed them. Tammy's death was ruled as accidental due to drinking too much alcohol and then choking on her own vomit. And that was that. They'd gotten away with their first murder. Now, as time went on, obviously Tammy's family was absolutely devastated. Not so much Karla, I don't think, because, yeah, of all that stuff. But they were heartbroken that Tammy had, and you would be, accidental death. It is absolutely devastating what happened to her. I mean, what happened to her is devastating. What they thought happened to her was devastating. Not as bad as what actually happened to her. But, yeah, you get what I mean. During this time, Paul and Karla apparently taped themselves. And Karla is wearing clothes that look like Tammy. They're doing this weird sex thing, pretending to be Tammy, her sister, who's now dead, who they killed. I mean, it's very gross and sick, right? Right, definitely. So, they did actually move out of the Homolka household. They left the family to grieve about poor Tammy. And because they'd gathered enough sort of money to be able to buy their own house, which is what they wanted to do. That was the plan of it all. So they moved into their own home. It was a lovely house on Bayview Drive in the nearby town of Port Dalhousie. I don't know how to say that, but there you go. Dalhousie? I don't know. Okay, I'm sorry. Their plan was to get married. I don't know who proposed to who. I can't remember. Someone proposed to someone. So they were going to get married. And Karla was then planning the wedding after they moved in. Something as well that I forgot to mention, when they buried Tammy, and I found this it's the nail in the coffin is like an apt saying, I guess, but not a very nice one in the circumstances. They actually put a picture of themselves in Tammy's coffin. Like, seriously. I'll show you the photo, but he is like, ee, big smiley face, ee, and they're hugging, and they put that in Tammy's coffin. They freaking killed her, and they had the audacity to put their photo in her coffin. And that just made me really angry. I'm not gonna lie. I was just like, what? I mean, when I read that, my hope was that that photo was no longer in there. I really, really hoped that. And according to, like, some information that I read, the police actually eventually, I'm skipping ahead a bit here, but eventually dug a body up. I don't know. I can't remember what the saying is. The word for it. Excavated a body? No, that's not it. You know what I mean. And that photo was removed, and then her parents was like, don't put that photo back. So thank goodness that photo is no longer there, because it just made me so mad. All these horrible things were going on. Paul and Karla were just horrible people. And then on the 15th of June in 1991, Paul was apparently stealing license plates for this smuggling business that he was trying to get up. I don't know. He was looking around to steal his license plates, and this is when he comes across a young girl. She was hanging around in the dark, and it was 14-year-old Leslie McAfee. They chatted a little bit. She told him that her parents had locked her out of the house because she broke curfew, and she asked him for a cigarette. Now, Paul told her that they were in the back of his car, and then he forced her into his car, blindfolded her, and took her back to his house. Leslie was held hostage for 24 hours, while Paul and Karla taped everything, repeatedly raped, sexually assaulted her in various ways, which I am not getting into. They tortured her and humiliated her, and it was disgraceful, and these people are horrific people. And then eventually she was strangled to death. The pair put her body in the basement, and then they left her there. Then the next day, I believe one of them went out for dinner. Paul goes down. He starts dismembering Leslie's body. Then they put her pieces in cement, and they decide that they're going to dump her remains in Lake Gibson. So just over 2 weeks after that happened, you know, they're having the wedding. Like, seriously, they're having this picture perfect ceremony, getting married off in this beautiful lake somewhere. You can't make it up. That very same day, though, as they were getting hitched, some poor, unsuspecting fishermen actually came across Leslie's body pieces at the bottom of that lake. I don't know the circumstances around that. I don't know how they found them, but they did. At this point in his life, he has sexually assaulted who even knows how many women. He has killed 2 women, but he wants more. His wife goes out. I don't know whether it was his wife or whether it was both of them, but going out looking for something that they refer to as a sex slave. That was on the 16th of April in 92. And sadly, they came across somebody that they thought would be the perfect candidate. 15-year-old Kirsten French. She was on her way home from school. She had this long brown hair, was dressed in a school uniform, and Karla swatted her and then reportedly said to Paul, "What about her?" And that was that. They took her. Now, it seemed like, I guess, either Escalation or he liked her more than Leslie. It's just awful, but she was kept alive for 3 days. She was tortured, sexually assaulted, again humiliated. Everything was recorded. It was just horrific. 3 days of torture. They actually made her watch her parents, like, devastated on TV, asking for a safe return. Just pouring salt in the wound. It's just awful. And she really did everything that they asked her to do, because she really hoped that they would let her go. But they didn't. They ended up strangling her, killing her too. And I'm saying they here because they both blamed each other. So I'm not gonna try and, I don't know who actually did it. I don't know whether anybody knows who actually did it, because he said she did it, she said he did it. So I'm saying they did it. Kristen's naked body was found on the 30th of April in 92 in a ditch in a close by cemetery to where Leslie's body was actually buried, the second victim. So, do you remember the DNA evidence that they took of Paul with regards to the Scarborough rapist case? Now, obviously, he moved out of Scarborough, right? And then, wow, suddenly these rapes stopped. Amazing. Don't know how it happened. The killer must have moved where he was, because then they started happening there. Go figure. But none of it was tied up to him. Nobody put two and two together. And finally, in December of 92, they were getting round to testing Paul's DNA that they had been, I believe it had been sat there for 2 years at that point. On the 27th of December, Paul beat the crap out of Karla with a flashlight. I mean, totally beat the crap out of her. She had these massive black eyes. Both eyes were black. She ended up going to hospital. She said that she'd been in some sort of car accident or an accident or something like that. She ends up going back to work. Her co-workers don't believe her, so they ring her parents and say, like, they think that she's been beat up. They think that she's lying about, you know, these black eyes and things like that, and how badly beaten she was. So her parents literally came to the house that day and basically dragged her out of it. And at one point she ends up running back in because she's looking for something, right? She doesn't find something that she's looking for, and she ends up leaving again because she was actually looking for the tapes, right? If the were gonna hit the fan, the proverbial was gonna hit the fan, she wasn't gonna be going down with the ship. So she wanted those tapes to be taken away because they showed her being, you know, a part of it, being explicitly a part of it. So she wanted them, but Paul had hidden them from her, so she couldn't find them, and she had to leave without them. It seems like he maybe, I don't know, maybe he thought that she would eventually, maybe it was after the beating and he figured, you know, what if she leaves me, what if she takes the tapes, I'll just hide them. I don't know when they were hidden, but they were hidden. He was smarter than her in that sense. Anyway, she ended up at a hospital, and then she ended up filing some charges where she said that she was a battered spouse, filed charges against Paul Bernardo, and basically said that it was over, that they were through. He was arrested, and then he was released on bail or something like that, and then, you know, again, that was that. It was done. But then it wasn't, because now we're getting to round two. Finally, the police are testing Paul's DNA. It has been 26 months since he gave it, and his ticket is finally at the front of the queue. So they test Paul Bernardo's DNA against the Scarborough rapist, and guess what? Wow, it's a match. Who knew? Who knew that the sketch that was made of Paul that looked exactly like him was actually Paul? I mean, I jest, because what else can you do at that point? So Paul Bernardo was now known to be the Scarborough rapist, and they put him under surveillance, and they were going to watch his every move. Then they decided that they were going to try and flip Karla. Obviously, he had beat her. They didn't know that she was complicit with these crimes. Battered spouse, you know, maybe they could get information off of her. Maybe she was terrified and knew something about it, and they were going to try and flip her, basically. So she was interviewed by police on the 9th of February in 93. She didn't actually say anything to them, I believe, during that interview that implied that Paul was a Scarborough rapist, but she ended up breaking down at home later on, where she admitted, like, all these things to her family and admitted it all. Well, not all of it there and then, but most of it. So at this point, you're thinking they're both like facing charges. Prosecution actually offered Karla a deal because they believed, she said that she had nothing to do with it, that it was all Paul, that basically would threaten her and force her to, I guess, do certain aspects of it. But, you know, it was forced. She didn't want to do it. She thought he would kill her if she didn't do it, kind of thing, that she was also the victim in all of this. And the prosecution ended up offering her this deal that basically if she testified against Paul and pled guilty to like this lesser charge, she would get a sentence of 10 years, providing that she didn't actually kill any of them. And I mean, imagine the police's surprise when they're looking at him for this Scarborough rapist, and then she admits to killing like 3 people, that she knows that he killed 3 people. It must have been crazy. Because they were just looking at him just sexual assaults. Obviously, that is not just a sexual assault, but you know what I mean. So, at that point, Karla's this victim too. You know, her husband is this big, bad murderer, sexual predator, which he was, but she was also, in my opinion, because there's a lot of debate about this, and I don't get why. I really don't get why, but there is. A lot of people think that she was the victim in all this, that he forced her to do it. I just don't. I don't. Honestly don't, but okay.
The victim was matter-of-fact when she toured police through her Bayview Avenue home where 2 teenagers were murdered. She had chosen to dress as a schoolgirl. Homolka's response to being back in one of the rooms where Leslie Mahaffey was attacked was to ask police about her furniture.
Can you answer a question for me? Was any of the furniture damaged as a result of the investigation?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay, good, so I'm asking for.
And upstairs in the bathroom where they cleansed Kristen French's body of evidence, Homolka inquired after her perfume samples. And in the basement where Leslie Mahaffey was dismembered, she had yet another inquiry on behalf of her other sister, Lori.
Can I ask you a question?
I'm afraid I can't answer.
Can I have that book? My sister wants it. Or does that have to stay here?
That has to stay for now, but we can make those arrangements.
Okay, thank you. And my Christmas tree.
Now, Karla never banked on these tapes ever seeing the light of day. Nobody ever did. But halfway through Paul's trial, these tapes were found. I believe they were hidden up in the bathroom or something like that. So, as you can imagine, when these tapes came to light, you know, it caused a lot of crap because she'd been given a deal, and then these tapes came up and it showed that she was seemingly a willing participant in it, and, you know, crazy stuff. She's claiming that she's this battered wife, that he forced her to do it, yada yada, and then these tapes basically tell a different story. That she was enjoying it all, not that she was a woman in danger kind of thing. Whilst undergoing a psychiatric assessment, like before her trial actually begun, this was on the 13th of April 93, she ended up writing this letter to her parents. Dear Mum, Dad and Laurie, this is the hardest letter I've had to write, and you'll probably all hate me once you read it. I've kept it inside myself for so long, and I just can't lie to you anymore. Both Paul and I are responsible for Tammy's death. Paul was in love with her and wanted to have sex with her. He wanted me to help him. He wanted me to get sleeping pills from work to drug her with. He threatened me and physically and emotionally abused me when I refused. No words I can say can make you understand what he put me through. So stupidly, I agreed to do as he said, but something, maybe the combination of drugs and the food she ate that night, caused her to vomit. I tried hard to save her, and I'm so sorry, but no words I can say can bring her back. I have thought many times of killing myself, but I couldn't put you through the pain of losing another daughter and sister again. I don't blame you all if you hate me, I hate myself. I live with the pain of knowing I unintentionally killed my baby sister every day. I think that's the real reason I put up with Paul's abusive behaviour. I felt I deserved it for allowing him to drug and rape my beautiful baby sister. I loved her so much and never wanted to do anything to hurt my Tammykins. Please believe me. I would gladly give my life for hers. Nothing I can do or say can bring her back. I don't expect you to ever forgive me, nor will I forgive myself. Karla, XOXO. All that being said, right, I found something online that is called the Fireside Chat. It is a transcript. So basically, when this trial occurred, these tapes were played for the jury, but not the audience, because they didn't want the families to go through all that again, and you can imagine why. But the audio was played for everyone else. So that was enough, that was played. And I believe that possibly this transcript comes from that, is what I can see, I think. It is very disturbing, very haunting. I've read the entire thing, because, of course, I read it so you guys don't have to. Well, I'm not going to tell you what's in it though, so, you know, if you want to go and read it, go and read it. But what is in it just infuriated me, like, a lot. They talked about what they did to Tammy. They talked about Tammy a lot in it. It's disgusting. And doesn't really portray a person that was being forced to do anything. She's calling him the king. That's where I got king from. Just go read it if you're interested. But, you know, just be warned that it's, when taken into context of what they did, it's just so gross. Just no other word for it, gross. Following one of the biggest trials in Canadian history, Paul Bernardo was convicted of a number of offences, and 2 of those included first-degree murder. 2 counts of aggravated sexual assault. And of course, they had the tapes at that point, so it was what more proof do you need at that point? There's literally him doing it all and Karla there too. Just, that was all they needed, I guess. And that's why it's infuriating, because at that point, you know, they didn't need the plea deal that they had with Karla to give her all this information, because they had nothing on him for these murders, so they needed her. But then the tapes came out, and that was video evidence, a video confession essentially, and so they didn't need Karla anymore, but they'd already done it. I don't know how that stands up. Like, can you go back on something like that? Probably not. I guess they can't, because they didn't. Anyway, Paul was sentenced to life imprisonment, which is approximately 20 years in Canada, I believe. But then he was later declared a dangerous offender, and hell yeah, he's a dangerous offender. That then changed it to, you know, most likely he will never get out. Yay! Good. He should never, ever, ever get out. Ever. Ever. Karla got her sentence, which she had the plea deal, so she got 10 years. She then got an additional 2 years for her involvement in the death of Tammy, but then she was never charged with that or something. I don't know. And then loads of photos came out of her in jail. She was having a whale of a time, you know. Best life ever. She was living her best life in jail. Brilliant. She loved it. It's not really what jail is for, but there you go. Then that angered the public some more. Karla was actually released in 2005, the 4th of July to be exact, and that made the media and the public very angry once more. The fact, I mean, she served 10 years. I personally, again, it's debated, I have no idea why. I really don't, especially after reading that fireside chat, like, seriously. But people think that, you know, she was a victim. Some people do think that she was the victim in this, that he forced her to do it. I personally do not. I think that she was just as sick as Paul, and that she should have got longer. There, I said it. It's all out there now. That's just what I believe. That's my personal opinion. If you guys don't agree with me, that's fine. You know, looking into the case, that is what the conclusion I've come to. And a lot of people do believe the same. So they had a right to be angry. Shortly after she was released, she applied to change her name, but she was denied that. But then she got that wish anyway. Well, sort of, because she ended up marrying someone else. Thierry Baudelaius. I can't say that name. Is it Terry? I don't know. Either Thierry or Terry Baudelaius. I'm just going to put the name up on the screen because I cannot say that name. Apologies. But she basically took on his name. She ended up having 3 children with him. And she lived her life. Although she is just a very hated woman now by many, many people. I believe she's no longer with him. You know, I don't know. I think I read somewhere that she's no longer with him. Maybe. Wherever she goes, nobody wants her there. She's just not welcome anywhere, which, understandable. A lot of people believe that she's done her time and that she should be, you know, she's done her time and that's that. I don't think she did enough time in the first place, so not my opinion, but there you go. And again, there's just a lot of discussion about whether she was a willing participant in this or not, whether she was forced to do it or not. I'd like to know what your thoughts are on it. Like I said, if you can stomach it, go and read the fireside chat and, you know, let me know what you think. But yeah, that's the end of the case. If you guys have enjoyed this video, give me a big thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel for similar content. Anyway, that's all I have today on the case of the Ken and Barbie killers, Paul Bernardo and Karla Homolka. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I appreciate every one of you. And until next time, bye.